Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and I want to share an amazing automation tool that is guaranteed to make your Pro Tools workflow faster. Whether you're an artist, producer, editor, or engineer, you're bound to run into situations where you have to complete a repetitive task. If you don't know about Keyboard Maestro, it's a game-changing automation software for Mac OS that lets you automate virtually anything on your system and activate advanced macros with a single key. A macro is an automated input sequence that imitates keystrokes or mouse clicks. We're going to go over just one example of a macro I use for my work, but in future videos, I plan on demonstrating more ways Keyboard Maestro can automate processes in any application. Please subscribe to JP Audio and like this video if you find it helpful. The macro that we're going to build from scratch right now is very basic in the scope of what you can do with this program, but the great thing is that Keyboard Maestro's user-friendly interface makes it easy to make and fine-tune your own macros. So even if this example doesn't solve your exact issue, it will give you a lot of insight into how creating and using your own macros could benefit your workflow. I received materials from a client for a film that I'm dubbing in English, but unfortunately those materials did not include a Pro Tools prep session to work off of for our recording sessions. The purpose of preparing our session is so that when the voice talent comes in to record, you can tab through empty regions on the timeline where their character has dialogue and use that to quickly navigate to every cue and save precious time during your session. Luckily, the client sent over a full cut of the film and a spreadsheet that included the start and end timecode for every line in the script, as well as a column for the designated character. So what we can do with this data is copy and paste those timecode numbers in Pro Tools and create empty clips for every line, with each character on their own track. If I was working on a short film, maybe this wouldn't be a problem to do manually, but as you can see, we have about 1,000 lines of dialogue and reactions to record. You don't need to do the math to know that doing this manually would take many more hours than anyone would want to spend on creating a prep session. This is where Keyboard Maestro comes in. Every step of the process for creating these empty regions for the prep session can be executed using keyboard shortcuts, either within Pro Tools or system-wide on Mac OS. That means if we break down the exact steps of copying and pasting our timecode from the spreadsheet into Pro Tools, and take note of the keyboard shortcuts for those steps, we can plug all of that information into Keyboard Maestro and have a macro that does every step for us. If the action you want to program for your macro isn't bound to any shortcut in Pro Tools, you can create one yourself using the Keyboard Shortcuts menu if you are using Pro Tools 2022.4 or later. If you have an earlier version of Pro Tools, you can potentially create one using Keyboard Maestro. So the first thing to notice is that since this new macro is in my Pro Tools Shortcuts folder, it only triggers when Pro Tools is the application in focus. We'll add a keystroke action and hit Command-Tab to switch focus over to the spreadsheet and begin the steps we want to loop. This also means that for this macro to work, your spreadsheet application needs to be the most recent app in focus in your application switcher after Pro Tools. The application switcher is the interface that comes up when you use the Command-Tab shortcut, so just make sure Pro Tools and your spreadsheet are the first and second apps on that list. Additionally, you'll notice that I'm adding some short pauses throughout the macro to make sure all the applications do their job in time for the next step. This will sometimes take trial and error to get the right balance of stability and overall time to go through the steps in the macro. Now that all the technical Keyboard Maestro stuff is out of the way, the rest is really straightforward. We will organize our spreadsheet by characters so that we have the macro go through every line for one character at a time, and then we'll create a new track for each one as we go. Let's go over each step that we're telling the macro to do. The first is copying the timecode start for the first line of our character with Command-C, switching over to Pro Tools and hitting the numpad/ key to highlight the timecode start in Pro Tools. Then Command-V to paste the timecode, and then hit Return. Now switch back to the spreadsheet and hit the right arrow to move to the timecode end column. Once again, we'll copy, tab to Pro Tools, and this time hit numpad/ twice to highlight the end timecode, paste, and return. Now you'll see Pro Tools has highlighted this timecode selection on our character's track, so we can make an empty clip by hitting Option-Shift-3. Now that we have a blank region created for that line, we'll tab back to this spreadsheet, hit the down and left arrow keys to get to our next line, and that will complete the loop for our macro. The final step for creating our macro is adding a repeat action right after the initial application switch that I mentioned earlier. Then we select all of our keystrokes after that point and drag them into the repeat action like this. You can figure out how many times you need to repeat the macro for each character by selecting all of the cells with that character's line in your spreadsheet, and the application should show you a total count in an info panel of some kind. Plug the number of lines for your first character into the repeat action and decide your keyboard shortcut to trigger your new macro. We'll click on the cell with the timecode start for the first line of our first character in the spreadsheet to get everything in place for the macro, and then switch our focus back to Pro Tools. Now you can trigger Keyboard Maestro and watch your macro complete this repetitive task in a fraction of time. We just need to create new tracks per character after the previous one completes, and highlight that track so that all of your new empty clips correspond to the character in your spreadsheet. This is just one of the few Keyboard Maestro automations that I use in my everyday workflow, and I'm excited to share more in the future. Let me know in the comments what you use Keyboard Maestro for and what macros you'd like to see me create from scratch to help you save time and streamline your workflow. I'm Jake with JP Audio. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more audio how-tos, demos, and reviews every week. Thanks for watching.